Can you watch this superconductor drama? Man, I know that it's like a total moonshot, but I really want this to end up being real. That would be so goddamn cool. And also like revolutionary if it ended up being real.
You might have heard news about the room temperature superconductor, but you probably haven't heard all the drama behind it. So recently, a team of researchers claimed that they created the first materials that could perfectly conduct electricity at ambient pressure and room temperature. And it's been met by a lot of skepticism from physicists. However, there is one major green flag. There's a lot of infighting and rushing to get credit for the experiment. Two separate papers have been submitted just hours apart.
Oh, wait, that actually is a huge green flag. Holy shit. The fact that they're actually fighting over credit is an indication that they're not just like faking something for a bit of attention, because they wouldn't want to cheapen like a fake story with competing over it. If oh man, if it ends up being real, that's like holy shit.
One by a three-man team, thus qualifying it for a Nobel Prize, and the other paper that was submitted later has 6 authors. The theory is that the papers were not ready for publication, but someone was trying to take all the credit.
But they rushed him out. Yeah. Oh wait, that could actually be, because if they're faking the data, there would be no reason for them to compete over releasing it unless they both just like had the same idea for faking it and they wanted to do the same fake. I guess it's possible, but weird.
The backstory here is that Lee and Kim had both been working on this material since 1999 on and off, and though never successful, in 2018 they got another round of funding to try again. But it comes with some strings. A third person named Kwon is added to the mix. So Lee becomes the CEO, Kwon the CTO, and Kim the research director because he's the youngest. It takes them 3 years to figure out the production process. They realize they'll need a Western co-author for the papers, just because of how the industry works, and they bring in Kyung Tak, who is a Korean-American professor at the College of William and Mary. The patent filing takes place in 2023, and Kim starts to get nervous. He's afraid that the work will leak, that someone will steal it. Kyung Tak insists that more work is needed to finish the publication. There's still a lot of work to be done. However, on July 22nd, Kwon decides to publish the paper with only 3 authors, Lee, Kim, and himself. A reminder, a Nobel Prize can only be shared by 3 people. Kyung Tak gets a ping from a Korean contact and he immediately rushes to push out his own paper.
The thing that makes me optimistic here is that the thing that they're studying is really easy to test. Like, if they have superconductors that operate at room temperature and ambient pressure, that's not like something you would double check with like a year of biocultural research or whatever. Like it's not something that you would have to check with like this gigantic follow-up or whatever. You could literally just test it, you know? If you're gonna fake a paper, you'd fake it on something that's hard to double check, like that previous Korean scandal with the cloning, where it was really difficult to double check if he was being real or not. Ooh.
Deliberately leaving Kwon out of the authors list. So this is a pretty good sign in the sense of why would you go through all this trouble if the technology didn't actually work?
How much does this mean for technology? If this ends up being real, it would probably be the biggest physics breakthrough of our lifetimes. It would be maybe larger than that. In terms of its potential effects on human development, it might exceed like everything, including potentially like atomic research. The engineering potential of superconductors that can operate under regular conditions are ridiculous. Yeah, yeah. Since electricity, it'd be yeah. Can we solve climate change with these? It would make green energy significantly more viable, cheaper, easier to use. MRIs would become insanely cheap. That's just the beginning of it. The potential ramifications, I don't get how it would be applied. Okay, when we move electricity around, okay, there are 2 main things. When we move electricity around through wires, okay, the wires don't conduct electricity perfectly. You know, gold is a great conductor, but it's not a 100% conductor. When electricity, that's just electrons, move through a wire, some of it gets lost as heat. So if you run enough power through a cord, like that's why it can melt the insulation, right? Like that's why cords are rated for only a certain amount of energy, because if you exceed that, it gets really hot. That can damage the wire, can damage the insulation. It's not perfect. A perfectly conductive material would never generate any heat because nothing would be lost as heat. The energy would be kept as electricity. A superconductor traditionally is a material which, when lowered to a certain temperature or kept at a very, very high pressure, perfectly conducts electricity. But the temperature that it has to be kept at is so low that it's not feasible for broad use. The first superconductors had to be cooled with liquid helium, not easy to get. After that, it was liquid nitrogen, much easier to get, but still not easy. You have to keep it like 200 below. It's not feasible for like widespread industrial use. But if something can work in regular temperature, in regular pressure, you would have a zero loss transmission of electricity, which means two major things. One, electricity from any point in the globe could reach any other point in the globe, theoretically, with enough like infrastructural development, with no loss in energy. If you have a gigantic power plant in the middle of the Sahara, and you want that energy to fuel the whole world, congratulations. You no longer have wires burning out across the Atlantic. You can get it anywhere, anytime. There's no loss in efficiency. That's a high level after we build a lot of power grid infrastructure kind of deal, but it's not theoretically impossible. And two, and this is the bigger one, batteries. Right now, the way batteries work is they're a combination of metals and chemicals that have a differential in how they keep electrons when subjected to certain conditions. Basically, they're a big electron storage vat, and when you want energy from a battery, you convince the electrons to move from one side of a barrier to another. And if you want to store energy in a battery, you convince them to go that way, That's how batteries work, basically. The problem with batteries is that they catch fire and explode a lot. They're also expensive, they're difficult to make, they're difficult to transport. Batteries are complicated and dangerous because the chemicals that we use to efficiently store electrons are heavy and dangerous. Yeah, they degrade. But think about it. If you had superconductors with lossless electrical transmission, why couldn't a battery just be a gigantic electrical coil that you run power through and then just keep it cycling there forever? When you wanted to, all you'd have to do was reactivate a connector and pull energy from it. But if you wanted to keep energy, you could just keep it in a loop. You would no longer need to build a battery. You could keep the electrons cycling in the entire conductor. It would be unimaginably efficient compared to the batteries that we use today. Can't explode, can't overheat. It would generate a magnetic field that would probably keep your pacemakers from working if you're within a mile of them. But we'll build them. We'll build them in a safe place. Okay. The reason this is so important is because it means that for power plants that don't reliably generate electricity, like solar or electric. The big problem that we have is when you guys use electricity, the electricity that's allowing me to right now stream to you guys just got made at the power plant. It doesn't get held. Power plants generate a certain amount of electricity per nanosecond. They generate it constantly. It goes into the grid and it gets pulled out by everything connected to it as needed. This was made by, well, I'm in Washington, so probably by the turn of a hydroelectric plant somewhere north of me. But this energy that I'm using right now was made now. The water that pushed that turbine, that's now. And the problem with stuff like solar and wind is that it doesn't generate electricity consistently. It's not always windy. It's not always sunny. Sometimes it's nighttime. It's been known to happen. And what you'd need to do for people using energy during the night, if you rely entirely on solar, is have batteries capable of holding all of the excess energy so that when there's no extra energy being generated, they pull from the battery. Do you know how large and expensive batteries would have to be to supplant the generative power of solar plants during the nighttime if we relied entirely on them? The batteries would block out the sun. They would be giant bombs. I hope you don't smoke near them. The batteries necessary to supplement power during the nighttime would be inconceivably large and expensive and difficult to maintain and dangerous. But if we had superconductors that we could run the electricity through on a loop without having to worry about using batteries, congratulations, we've done it, we fixed it. It's a perfect lossless battery that's relatively easy to build, transport, and maintain. It doesn't lose effectiveness over time the way regular batteries do. It could generate energy during the day, hold it in a very powerful battery, and redistribute it to the power grid during the nighttime. That loop idea won't work. I am simplifying when I say run it on a loop. I saw scientists talking about it. I am really, really, really simplifying on a loop. It's not literally like it runs in a circle. It's more complicated than that. More complicated than I understand, but significantly better than batteries. Yeah, it runs on 2 loops, okay? Yeah, that's my understanding of the issue. Again, it might not work, but if this ends up being real, it could potentially fix a lot of problems. It would mean an easy solution to our energy crisis and thereby an easier solution to our climate crisis. Because the biggest weakness of renewable energy is, of course, the fact that it doesn't generate reliably. Want to make computers faster too? You could also use these to operate quantum computers, but that's a more theoretical thing, and quantum computers are magic anyway. I don't get it. Will it make electric cars safer? No, I don't think you could run those loops in a car. I don't think you could make them that small or portable, because if you did, you'd be running a magnetic field like because the battery would be running a magnetic field because you're running electricity through a if you I'm not sure. My understanding is that I don't think you could, but I could be wrong. I'm not a physicist. Trains, maybe trains. Maglev trains would be easy. Supercapacitors are already an idea for cars. It would 100% work. So what we're basically talking about is like a high efficiency supercapacitor, correct? For running the what I've been referring to as running the loop. We're talking about a super capacitor, a super mega ultra capacitor, basically. I know you like the wiki. Technological applications of superconductivity. The production of sensitive magnetometers based on squids, sure. Fast digital circuits, superconducting electromagnets for maglev trains, MRIs, nuclear magnetic resonance machines, magnetic confinement fusion reactors. Hey, there's our fusion boys in chat. And the beam steering and focusing magnets used in particle accelerators. Oh, particle accelerators. I didn't even think of that. Imagine how much easier running that would be if you had just like infinite superconductors. Low loss power cables. Yeah, that's the fusion gang shit. Wait, in the vacuum of space, would you need cooling for superconductors? No, because they don't heat. Because they're perfect conductors, so none of the energy that runs through them heats the surrounding material. You could theoretically, a superconductor could be running enough power to run a country, and you could place your hand on it with like no insulation, basically, or with like very minor insulation. That theoretically, like enough power to the power of the sun could be running through a conduit the diameter of like a river, and you could place your hand on it covered by like a micrometer of rubber, and you would be fine. You wouldn't want to touch it directly, though. It's still a current. That's the theory. Railgun and coilgun magnets. Hell yeah, brother. First application of our ambient temperature, ambient pressure superconductors, okay? We're going to fire bullets of tungsten directly through the planet's core in order to antagonize the Chinese. Notice how it doesn't mention power storage? But I read about that. Hold on. Nah, I read about that. It's out there. The truth is out there. Don't listen to the haters. It's somewhere here in like fancy pants techno jargon that I don't understand. Thank you, Space Duck. Superconducting magnetic energy storage. Hell yeah. Store energy in the magnetic field created by the flow of a direct current in a superconducting coil which has been cryogenically cooled to a temperature below its superconducting critical temperature. Ideally, we could skip this last part. Due to the energy requirements of refrigeration and the high cost of superconducting wire, SMES is currently used for short-duration energy storage. See, but that's what it would fix. You would no longer need refrigeration, and the superconducting material is supposed to be really conventional. So, with both of these problems fixed, it would it should be a very efficient. See, advantages over other energy storage methods. The time delay during charge and discharge is quite short. Oh yeah, there would be no delay in charging these batteries. If you put power into them, the power goes into them. There's no like charge time. It'd be the equivalent of plugging your phone in at 0% and it just being 100% because there's enough power in the grid. You're not running it through a battery chemical process. You're just putting the energy into the box of energy. Because for a battery, there's a chemical process that moves the electrons. But in this case, you're just putting the energy in. Power is available almost instantaneously. Very high power output can be provided for a brief period of time. Other energy storage methods, such as pumped hydro or compressed air, have a time delay. Thus, if demand is immediate, SMES is an option. Another advantage is that the loss of power is less than other storage methods because electrical currents encounter almost no resistance. Additionally, oh, this is another big thing. The main parts in an SMES are motionless, which results in high reliability. No chemical components and no moving parts means that this shit will outlast humanity. I'm exaggerating when I say that, but the lack of moving parts and chemical reactions means a uh, much higher degree of reliability. I can only assume so. Yes, Soth. How would it be motionless? Because it's a superconductor is literally just a magnet, basically. Fancy. I mean, basically, right? That's a superconductor is basically just a super magnet. I mean, it's a fancy pants magnet. No, it's a diamagnet. I don't know what that is. It's a fancy magnet and it makes stuff float. Okay, we're not even talking about the floating part. Okay, superconductor. I still don't know if this is real, but the fact that it might be real means that it is worth caring about. Here.
While I was doing this,
Hi, Nile Red.
I realized
This is a superconductor right down here. He made this disk himself and is cooling it right now with liquid nitrogen. This is a magnet covered in ferrofluid, which is magnetic fluid, iron particles on top of it, and it's literally just a disk. You're looking at a superconductor right here. Well, once it's cooled appropriately, it's a superconductor. There's the liquid nitrogen.
when it seemed cold enough, I then got my magnet, and I was honestly really nervous that it was just going to fall and hit the YBCO. Also,
That's
if
the
this
type of material that superconductors are typically made of now.
didn't work, then I'd have literally no idea what went wrong or how to fix it. Thankfully, though, it did end up working, and I honestly can't say how relieved I was to see this. Like I just said, if it didn't work, I'd have no idea what to do next, but I guess it really was just the oxygenation. I then tested each one to make sure that they were all good, and I also tried out the big one. One thing that I noticed, though, was that none of them floated the magnet as high as that first successful run. Also, the big one seemed to actually be weaker. To me, this meant that even though it was working now,
See, you'll notice that it basically holds the position here, and then it just rotates around. The reason for that is because superconductors have a very specific and very powerful kind of magnetic field relative to their size. That basically, because these are symmetrical along an axis, they're disks. Once they're held in place, and because the orientation of this magnet goes this way and this way, like in this direction, they can rotate along that axis while holding their exact place. It's basically magic. It's a whole thing. It's magic. It's magic. Nobody knows how magnets work. Nobody knows. Nobody understands. Fed the Poopy. Thanks for the name. You never know what exactly is going to work out, but I like to pay attention to stuff like this because I always have been pretty optimistic about humanity's ability to make cool shit. Think of the COVID vaccine, right? So much stuff is happening so quickly. There are a lot of problems, but a lot of them are social problems, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the tech world. CRISPR gene modification, there are potential, negative ramifications for that tech, but it's interesting. What about the vaccines? mRNA vaccine tech allowed them to get one out in just less than a year. That's incredible. And now this? There's stuff worth paying attention to, I think. Yeah, I'm not a physicist, Aloisi. How likely is it this tech would be gatekept from the working class? That's not really how tech works, right? Technology is put to use where it is useful. In this case, the technological applications of these superconductors would potentially be so beneficial that they would be used in widespread infrastructural projects, which means that they would be primarily to the benefit of the working class. But it's not like a gatekeeping thing, like, well, you're not allowed to. As I understand it, the fabrication process for these superconductors is supposed to be pretty conventional, too. Well, that'd be fun, Julia. Ah, yes, and the cotton gin helped the slaves do less work. Do you think we're being a little bit reductive here, perhaps? Come on. A big technological breakthrough that could potentially revolutionize almost every element of electricity generation and storage. And it's like, well, like insulin gets invented. Well, did the cotton gin help the slave work? Like, come on. It's not that simple. First of all, we're not slaves. So that's an important first thing to keep in mind. Second of all, we're not talking about like a workload being reduced. We're talking about like widespread applications of this technology. If it ends up being real, which again, we'll know in a couple weeks. No, Mansi, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it would work for cars. I think the batteries would need to be, like, huge, but efficient. You're wrong about SMESs. The storage density is terrible, like 50 times worse than lithium. You simply wouldn't have enough materials to do it. Is that true? 50 times? Oh, I'll look into it. I'll look into it. Though depending on the materials, even if it was 50 times less efficient, like space-wise, it could still end up being viable. The SNES, yes. That's also an option, Posadas John. Could this make electric planes a possibility? They're already a thing, but no. If the storage system for the energy involves generating a magnetic field, then no. They couldn't have that in a plane, right? That would fuck with the equipment on the plane. One of the papers leaked, and apparently it's not good. Yeah, well, the papers are being rushed out, but the fact that they're being rushed out might be a positive, because people don't usually rush out a quick, like, attention bait headline that is going to get disproven in a week, right? They would want to make a good case for it, but they might try to be rushed out to compete over a Nobel Prize. I don't know. We'll see.